All right, guys, what is up? So today we're going to be talking about the supporting cells of the nervous system, otherwise known as the neuroglia. So to first understand the whole supporting cell stuff, we should get an understanding of what they're supporting. So there's something called nervous tissue, which essentially is just the primary tissue component of our nervous system. It's composed of all of our supporting cells, otherwise known as neuroglia, and our neurons. In this video, we're just going to be talking about neuroglia just to simplify things and break things down for better comprehension and understanding. So let's get started with that. So neuroglia are very similar to neurons, but they do not conduct nerve impulses. They might look the same in some instances, and they might resemble them, but the most important thing to remember is that they do not conduct nerve impulses. They're there to primarily support the nervous system. Their primary their primary function is to sip neurons in the central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. So that's to support, insulate, and protect neurons. You'll find that going through I love mnemonics, I really just have used mnemonics all my life. I feel that it really helps in understanding difficult concepts and really solidifying it in your memory. So I'll be using a lot of mnemonics. But with that being said, I'm going to provide a brief overview of our six neuroglia cells. We've got four in the central nervous system and two in the peripheral nervous system. So we've got oligodendrocytes, microglia, astrocytes, and ependymal cells in the central nervous system, and we've got satellite cells and Schwann cells in the peripheral nervous system. So let's get started with astrocytes. So these got their name because of the way they're shaped, right? They look like a star. So some guy was like, hey, these kind of look like a star. Let's name them star cells. So therefore, the name astrocyte was born. These are the most abundant and diverse cells within the central nervous system. There are actually 5 times as many astrocytes as there are neurons, which is crazy to think about because there are so many neurons in our nervous system, and to think that there are 5 times as many astrocytes present, you'll understand that there's some importance to these things, right? So they've got several functions. Some primary ones are to control the permeability of our blood-brain barrier. Now, our blood-brain barrier is kind of this filtration system where certain aspects can cross the blood-brain barrier to enter our brain, and certain molecules cannot. So it serves as a layer of defense, and astrocytes help with this by controlling the permeability. And this protects the chemical environment of our brain and the living environment for our neurons. They also regulate functions that are implicated in neurogenesis and synaptogenesis. So they're assisting in the creation of neurons and synapses and synaptic clefts and just assisting with the well being of transmission. One major function they have is something called astrogliosis. So when you're injured, let's say you cut yourself while cooking, right, on your finger, a scar will form over that on any part of your body. But when your brain is injured, there's a different scarring mechanism that occurs, and that's through astrogliosis. This is the formation of a glial scar. Your brain does not scar like the remainder of your body. It has a unique scar that's composed of astrocytes. So if you would damage your brain or have a traumatic brain injury, then you will most likely be having the formation of a glial scar. And finally, astrocytes contribute to the neuroimmune state of our brain as a whole. The next neuroglial cell is ependymal cells. These are epithelial glial cells that line the surface of all of our ventricles in the brain and the spinal cord. We'll be going more into ventricles and cerebrospinal fluid in a later video, but so this might not make a ton of sense right now, but it'll make more sense as we get there. But the primary function of ependymal cells are to create, regulate, and assist in the circulation of cerebrospinal fluid, otherwise known as CSF. It also assists with the transportation of electrolytes and solutes between CSF and brain parenchyma. Now, what is brain parenchyma? Well, it's just a fancy term for any essential or any functional part of the brain. So basically, it's just assisting in the transportation of nutrients between the CSF and our brain's functional parts. Next up, we've got oligodendrocytes. So these are very important in our central nervous system. These are highly specialized neural cells that are responsible for myelinating axons of the CNS. Now, myelin is a very important concept. We'll touch on it now. I'll get into it a little later with Schwann cells, but for now, myelin is essential for increasing the propagation speed of nerve impulses and transmission. It does so by creating these things called myelin sheaths right here, and the nerve impulse can actually jump from this point to this point, this point to this point, this point to this point via saltatory conduction. These little gaps between the myelin sheaths are known as the nodes of Ranvier. So the action potential just jumps and it speeds it up significantly. So oligodendrocytes primarily assist in speeding up action potential propagation in our central nervous system so that we can communicate with different parts much faster. Finally, the fourth neuroglial cell is the microglia. This is kind of the patrol and scavenger and hunter for the CNS, and it makes up 10 to 15% of all of our cells found in the brain. This is our first and main form of active immune defense for the central nervous system, and it's constantly roaming and scavenging to find debris and to monitor neuron health. So it's kind of cool. It's like this little mini drone that's going through your central nervous system, making sure everything's okay. And if something isn't okay, it'll take care of that as soon as possible or assist in notifying other cells to come and help. Now, we have an understanding of the neuroglia of the central nervous system, so we can move on to the peripheral nervous system. So we've got two primary ones, satellite glial cells and Schwann cells. So satellite glial cells are primarily responsible for supplying nutrients. They protect, they cushion neural cell bodies, but they also give nutrients to all the neurons around them. Also, a quick fun fact is that these are the precursor cells to skeletal muscle cells. I actually did not know that, so I thought that was kind of cool, but that's just me. But with that being said, the only thing you really need to know about the satellite glial cells is that they supply nutrients and they protect and cushion the neuronal cell bodies of the peripheral nervous system. Schwann cells are the peripheral nervous system counterpart to oligodendrocytes. They act a little differently, but they still have the same function. They serve to myelinate the peripheral nerves, and they do so by kind of wrapping around them. So the oligodendrocytes actually form myelin sheaths, but Schwann cells wrap around peripheral nerves and form myelin sheaths with their cells. They also help with phagocytic functions to clear any cellular debris. So I drew up a little infographic at the bottom, or not an infographic, but a diagram at the bottom, which is what I was talking about earlier with the saltatory conduction. But so there are nodes of Ranvier, and these are gaps between myelin sheaths. So the yellow dots here, or stars, are your nodes of Ranvier. They're basically little gaps in between myelin where action potentials can jump to. Myelin sheaths serve as like this insulation, so action potentials jump over them rather than traveling through them. And this just serves to really speed up impulses in both the central nervous system and peripheral nervous system, and it makes for a more efficient system. That's why people with MS or multiple sclerosis have difficulty with smooth movements or walking or essentially any movement because they have myelin sheaths deteriorating in their system, so their nerve impulses travel slower. They don't have as much ability to keep up with their body's demands. So, just to recap, we've got all six neuroglial cells here. We have four of the CNS and two in the peripheral nervous system. Oligodendrocytes serve to form myelin sheaths so action potentials can jump farther and farther, or not farther and farther, but quicker. We have microglia, which serve as the scavenger and patrol centers for the central nervous system and making sure everything's in tip-top shape. We've got astrocytes, which are the most diverse microglia, and these serve to assist in controlling the permeability of our blood-brain barrier. They help with neurogenesis and synaptogenesis, And they also serve to form our glial scars to protect the brain from further injury. And then we have our ependymal cells, which just assist to create, maintain, and circulate cerebrospinal fluid. And these are located in all the ventricles of our brain and spinal cord. Then we have our peripheral nervous system, neuroglia. We have satellite cells, which give nutrients and they cushion and protect our neuronal cell bodies in the peripheral nervous system. And we have our Schwann cells, which wrap around peripheral axons to form myelin sheaths so that action potentials can propagate quicker. And they're very similar to oligodendrocytes. These two are essentially the same function, just different mechanisms of action. With that being said, that's pretty much all you need to know for the basics of these 6 neuroglial cells of our nervous system. They're pretty cool, they're really interesting, but I hope you understood these things and they weren't too complicated. And yeah,